Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Colossians. We're still in Colossians chapter 3. Today we're going to start reading at verse 18. Now, what we're going to discover is that in this section of Colossians, which goes from verse 18 of chapter 3 through verse 1 of chapter 4, Paul gives instructions to Christian homes or to Christian households. This section is sometimes called the household code. It's a code of behavior for homes that are based in the Lord. It's a rather long section. Paul's going to give instructions to wives and to husbands and children and parents, servants and such. And so I want to read the whole section, and then we'll talk about it in some detail. Probably spend a few sessions looking at it. So let's begin reading at verse 18 of chapter 3. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives. Do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything, and do it not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all of your heart, as working for the Lord and not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Jesus Christ you are serving. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for their wrongs. There is no favoritism. Masters, provide your slaves with what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. All right, now when we read this section, we are immediately reminded that there's a very similar section in the book of Ephesians. In the letter to the Ephesians, Paul also has a section of the household code where he gives essentially the same instructions to the Ephesian believers. That's in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21 through chapter 6, verse 9. Now, I've told you before, we've mentioned it, I think, several times that this study, that the books of Colossians and Ephesians were written at the same time. While Paul was imprisoned in Rome, waiting trial, he sent both of these letters to the churches at the same time. So it's understandable that some of the same content would be found in both letters. And certainly it's understandable this household code would be given to the Ephesians as well as to the Colossian believers. As I said, they're essentially the same. They're parallel passages. But what's interesting is that in the book of Ephesians, there's a little more detail given. Colossians, he gives the same instructions, but in a more summary form. And in Ephesians, he goes into more detail about the why of the instruction. Just it's an interesting kind of look that Ephesians has more detail, same instructions, but more detail, more of the why of the instructions than the book of Colossians does. But regardless, the same instructions is given in both. Now, as we go through, we're going to see that Paul talks about all the members of a household. Husbands and their wives, their children, the obligation of children, parents to children. But he also talks about the servants in the household. Now, remember in Roman times, in the Roman world, I should say, the household included more than just the immediate family. You know, in our day, when we think of a home, we think of husband, wife, and children. The immediate family. But in ancient times, it included, larger than that, it would include the extended family, and it would include all those who worked for the household, the servants, and those who were attached to the household. They were all considered part of the household. And Paul wants the Colossian believers to understand that Christian homes must be different than the homes of those who are not of the faith, because they reflect the presence of the Lord. He's not only Lord of our individual lives, he's Lord of our homes. And his presence is in our homes. And thus, the lordship of Jesus must be reflected in the way that the home operates and the relationships within the home. So Paul is very specific on some of the instructions he gives for the Christian home. So tomorrow we're going to start looking in some detail about these instructions and what they represent as to what Christian homes ought to be and how they should pattern the reality that the Lord is in our midst. So join us tomorrow as we begin to look in some detail at these instructions in the household code that Paul gives to Christian believers.